Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Gerst. I've been hiring, firing, and mentoring executives, frontline employees, interns, and job seekers in companies around the world through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. I work with people in Hong Kong, India, Australia, and across the United States. What sets them apart? A lot, but there's more they have in common. And one of those commonalities is transition is a part of life. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions that are big and small. It also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet, the people who can make the difference that matters to you right now. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big change. The insight track you're going to access during our future episodes is better than a crystal ball. It's the exact information you need to take that next step. Whether you're a new grad applying for your first professional job, someone looking to transition your work experience into a promotion, launching your own company, or maybe even starting to plan your retirement, you're in transition, and this series is for you. We all know transition can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have VIP access to the future you want. Are you tired of the uncertainty of being passed up? We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to the front of the line. So, if change is on your horizon, or maybe just the thought of change, you won't want to miss this discussion. It could be the exact edge you need to turn transition into an amazing opportunity. Bruna De Palo, thank you so much for being with us on this episode of People in Transition. I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
My pleasure, Bob. Thank you so much for inviting me in.
Bruna, when you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Bob, when I was younger, I wanted to be a lot of things like every little child, but I think mostly I was dreaming about being a powerful, successful businesswoman. That was probably the most prominent dream.
And what were the transition moments that you went through to get you from that picture of yourself as a young child to the fruition of that powerful businesswoman that you are today?
Oh, that was a very long and unimaginable journey. I didn't set myself up for that direction immediately. So I had to lose myself in order to find myself again and finally get into the direction I wanted. And by losing myself, it means I went into a career that had nothing to do with me, really nothing, but it was just the most reasonable thing to do at that time. So I went into IT. I stayed there for a very long time, mostly because I didn't know what else I could or I wanted to do. And then only when I was really, really fed up after nearly 20 years, I decided to change country in order to re-question myself entirely and find myself somewhere else, far from my country stuck mentality in terms of career. That's where I got completely lost. And then finally, in that tunnel, I found myself, and then I decided to build a career that was truly resonant with who I am as a person.
And what is that career, Bruna?
I'm a neuroscience-based executive leadership and career coach and trainer today.
And what does that mean?
That's my favorite question, Bob. So what I do is I help my clients, mostly executive and leaders or private individuals, who want to make a significant change either in their career or in their leadership style. But the way I do it, that's normally the job of every coach. What I do differently is that I teach them, thanks to my passion and studies in neuroscience, I teach them how their brain works in very simple, clear, and relatable terms, because everything that they do and they want to do, it all comes from the use that they make of their brain. But the problem with this is that we all know that the brain is incredibly powerful, but nobody has given us the instruction manual. So we know it's powerful, but we don't really know how to use it. And that's the reason why often we're stuck in a behavior that we would like to change, but we don't know how. Or maybe, as it happened to me, being stuck in a career we don't belong to, or just simply not communicating with our team members in an empowering way as we would like to. So by learning how the brain works, my clients learn way better how to behave and discover themselves and how they work, but they also improve their relationship with others because they naturally increase their emotional intelligence by, again, understanding how other people's brain works.
Bruna, I'm sure you've coached many people on this when they come and say, I just don't know what the right career move for me is. I don't even know what path to go. How do you help them with that question?
That's exactly indeed, Bob, the reason people come to me, and that's always the first thing that they say. And I can understand them so much because I've been stuck at the same point for a very long time. So what I do is, before doing anything else, I explain the concept of how we should choose our career. Now, the reason why they are stuck and they have no idea what else they could do, it's not because there's nothing else that they can or want to do. Is that they cannot see the real answer that lies within, because it's probably covered by layers of expectations, ideas that they took from the society or their culture or their educational system that didn't allow them to truly see who they are and what they're good at, and therefore think about a career that would leverage that. So the first step someone has shown me at that time is to change that framework and understand what is the right career for me. So before looking at what would be the right career for me, we need to understand the concept. And the answer to that question is we need to understand that what we want from our career, it's not happiness and it's not even money. And I'm not saying that both things are not important. Of course they are. But what I'm saying is that too often we are drawn to think that the right career for us is the one that we're passionate about. I would argue that the right career for us is the one that makes us feel alive instead, because aliveness from a brain perspective means a specific balance of certain chemicals that are also key for peak performance and therefore success. On top of that, of course, feeling alive is a wonderful feeling that also has a huge impact in our mental and physical health. So I would say that the first step is understanding how we should think about our career. We need to find a career path that makes us feel alive. And the natural second step is, okay, how do I find it? Well, the first thing is understanding what makes you, Bob, or what makes you, Bruna, or what makes you, Mark, feel alive. Understanding what type of activity and understand the patterns common to all those type of activities. And you will notice that the pattern is always the same. We feel alive when we utilize our gifts. And what that means is that basically we feel alive when we leverage our being, not just our skills and experience. So what that means is that the right career for you is the one where you express your being through the doing, or as I said in my TED Talk, is bringing who you are into what you do. Now that's the key to feel alive and therefore succeed in a career. So that's the first stage. Without this, nothing else makes sense to me, because actions without making a mind shift won't take us anywhere. And to understand these, as you can see, there is a conspicuous part of understanding how the brain works and why we should choose aliveness instead of passion.
So, Bruna, that all sounds good, but my mom and dad, my significant other, my friends, they all think I should be a lawyer, but what makes me alive is music. How do you reconcile those things?
After we made the mind shift, that's the other issue. As I said, the expectations from others, which somehow have shaped our brain. This is what happens when people come at the top of the first mountain. I want to tell you, Bob, about this great book written by David Brooks, which is an author in the US. He wrote this great book called The Second Mountain, and he talks about the fact that we try to respond to expectation rather than just be ourselves. And he explains how that happens. And it makes totally sense in this perspective. Because basically when we are a teenager, no matter how rebel we want to look, there's only one thing that we all want, and that is fitting into a community, belonging to something and to someone that will feel close to us. That's the most important thing. So what happens is, differently from when we're kids, if as kids we love music, we are naturally drawn into music. But when we become teenager, we understand that in order to fit, we kind of have to abandon what's really natural for us in order to embrace what is expected from us. And that's where the moment we start being detached from what makes us feel alive to do what others is not well identified who is, but what others want. So what that means is that often at that age, we embark on a journey that is made of doing what is expected, which is generally getting good grades, finding a good partner, getting a degree, find a job, buy a house, get married, have a child, do your duties, and so on. So this is what David Brooks called the first mountain. But then there is a moment, which generally is around 30, 35 or something a little bit more than that. At the top of the first mountain, when we've done what we were supposed to do, we naturally take time to consider where we are in this journey. And that's the moment where normally clients come to me because they want to rediscover themselves and they want to set their second mountain in a way that makes them feel more present and is not just ticking boxes, but it's more like choosing the path. So I would say that in your example, you might be, for example, on a peak of the first mountain and questioning if you should really continue to be a lawyer or just follow your path for music. So it's already enough that you're taking the time to discover all this. Now, it very much depends on you are. But let's say that there might be some aspects of being a lawyer that you may like. Still, music is more important to you. We need to check in your context, of course, if you can afford a change. And if you can't, what else can we put together with music that makes you feel alive? And look for scenarios that, of course, we cannot see now, but there might be somewhere because there might be someone else in the world who has combined the two things. So we need to open up our mindset to new ideas, do our research in the world in a way that leverages all these aspects of our being, not just music, but maybe the characteristics of being a lawyer that could go with music, could create a path. I would say that we live in a world that is crazy enough to have very unimaginable jobs. So an example here could be that flight attendant who didn't particularly hate his job, but he was very much into music and particularly into rapping. And he couldn't leave his job because, of course, there were some financial concerns. But there's always a way to put the two things together. So what he's doing is bringing more of himself into what he does by rapping his message on the airplane. So this makes us smile. But for him, it was a huge step because these allowed him to keep his job, express himself more, connect better with the passengers, and feel that he's still alive and he's still choosing what he wants to do instead of just climbing another mountain that's been decided by someone else. So I would argue that there is always something that we can do, but we really need an open mind to combine who we are, what we want to do, and what we still need, because we still may have family to look after and some financial concerns. But there's always a way to bring more of who you are into what you do, not necessarily has to be a complete career change.
Bruna, have the skills that companies desire or are looking for, do you think that they have changed somehow during the pandemic?
Yeah, I see a change, a big change, which is a change that mostly we drove. During the pandemic, a lot of people had much more time to finally think about themselves. And that's where the Great Resignation movement started. This, of course, sparked a change on the other side. And now companies, or at least the smartest company, are much more interested in making people feel alive at work so that they won't lose the best talents. So the change that I've noticed in the market is that they are much more into well-being. I mean, the Great Resignation happened at the time when there was a lot of talking about mental health. So the two things combined pushed the smartest company to provide much more support. So there are a lot of companies now hiring coaches to help people feel alive at work, again, bring who they are into what they do, as well as taking care of their being at work and at home. So I would say that in terms of skills, there's a lot of talking in terms of emotional intelligence. Let's be honest, corporate always want money and more revenue. There's no doubt on that. But the good thing is that now companies are realizing that the highest revenue can only come from having a team where people understand each other, where they speak their language, and when they take care of their emotions. So, as I said before, emotions means a specific balance of chemicals in the brain. So if we want our team to perform at their best, we have to ensure that they have that balance of chemicals. And that is the result of a positive and safe environment. So differently from before, I would say that what is most requested in terms of skill now is very much emotional intelligence and everything that is related to that.
Bruna, do you comment on your resume or your LinkedIn post about your ability and maybe even desire to work remotely? And if you think yes, how do you show this?
I would say, Bob, it's important to understand if the industry we want to work on is open to remote work. So the best thing to do perhaps is to do a research depending on the job that you want to look for and see if type of companies you want to work for, if they're open to remote working. If the majority of the job descriptions say that they're open to this, I would definitely say yes, bring it in on your profile, because it's good to know in advance. When they look at your profile, they know in advance what you're standing for. If your industry or type of role doesn't show in the job descriptions that they're open to remote working, I would say it's something that we can evaluate. It very much depends on the job, Bob. I wouldn't say that everyone now is open to these. In Italy, for example, there are a lot of companies who are bringing people back in the office 5 days per week. It sounds to me like a big step back. Some roles require to be in the office, some don't. I would gauge what's the atmosphere in the company that you are interested in and see what's the major feeling and go with that. Of course, if you can only work remotely, it's better if you state it in directly on your profile, so no one will waste time. But if you can accept either to go back full time to the office or a hybrid solution, then not necessarily you have to write it there. It's something that you can discuss with the company at the interview stage.
Bruna, how might a networking group help you in your job transition?
Oh, definitely a lot. In the stages that I mentioned before, when I said the right path to change career is firstly to think about ourselves, rediscover ourselves, find what are our gifts. And by gifts, I mean those things that we do naturally, but that we also enjoy doing and that we tend to do well. So once we have a long list that goes way beyond the obvious, when we have our long list of gifts, the next stage is to go into the world and find a match in the job market. Now, there isn't, and there will never be a database with all the possible jobs in the world. So the best thing that someone can do if they want to find a match so that they can truly leverage their gifts in a career is to go into these groups or any other group starting from their own network and just talk to people and ask them, okay, this is who I am and this is what really makes me feel alive and where I tend to succeed. I cannot see a career path that is different from the one I am now. You come from a different experience. Your brain is set on other perspectives. Where would you see me succeed? What I'm saying is groups and network in general are key in this journey because my knowledge of the job market is by definition limited to what I know and where I come from. In a group, you can tap into other people's brain and ask them with their filters and their experience, where would they see you fit? So networking is a key part of this strategy in career change. Otherwise, the risk is that you will do the same mistake I did, which was moving from IT to digital marketing. Why? Because at that time, I didn't even know what were my gifts, or even if I knew what they were, I didn't know that coaching as a profession existed. And how do you know what you don't know? So tapping into other people's brain through the network is key to enlarge your perspective of what's possible in the job market.
Do you think the steps that a candidate would take to look for a job, is it somehow different if you are new to the work life? In other words, someone maybe just coming out of college or university versus someone who is more experienced, 10, 15, 20 years worth of work experience. Do you look for a job differently at those 2 points in time?
Yes and no. This is a good question. To a certain extent, no, because the logic is the same. We want to feel alive to ensure that we will succeed, even financially, and take care of our mental and physical health. So I would say, to a certain extent, the stages are the same. Let's always start from who we are. Sometimes we get out of university, but we studied something because our parents wanted us to, and not because that's the subject that makes us feel alive. So in that sense, we need to ensure that we know perfectly what lights us up. Once we've done these, the steps are nearly the same because, again, I would suggest to avoid job sites and go to the network first. Connect with people, hear what are their jobs, hear how they feel about jobs that seem interesting for you, and then it's time to move more concretely on the job site. So tapping into the network, it's still a common step to the two path. What would be different simply is that as a professional who has, for example, 15, 20 years of experience, of course, you have many more transferable skills and you want to be fully aware of them Again, I'm not talking about problem solving, communication, negotiating, because this is somehow expected. This is the problem with transferable skills. People tend to think about the most common and they don't go beyond the obvious, which is instead what companies want to hear from people who are shifting from another career. So in that sense, I would say it's different because you, as a professional, you want to leverage your previous experience and your top achievements. So you will have more shiny material to bring to a new employer. While as a graduate, of course, you can always focus on your achievements, maybe at university, in college, or in sport, but you have less leverage because not necessarily these translate into professional experience.
Bruna, how do you coach your clients to deal with the fear they might experience when they're looking for a job?
Once again, here's the brain guiding us. We need to understand from a brain perspective what it means, fear. Most importantly, I would say fear is fear of the unknown. So a lot of people, including me at that time, are stuck in their career change because what they're trying to do is to tell their brain that they want to remove what they have right now. Maybe what they have, it doesn't make them happy or alive, but still represents solidity, financial security. So when they say just the simple thought of, I want to change my career, might trigger fears, but simply because they want to remove something that is there and replace it with a huge question mark. So that's wrong because that triggers a huge level of cortisol in our brain that makes them feel stressed, stops them from thinking lucidly and openly to what's possible. And that's why they're often stuck. So the first thing that we need to do is what happens in the brain when we want to make a change. Because if we understand that dynamic, we understand what's the problem. So we can't say, I want to change career without focusing on the solution. If we keep focusing on the problem, we just keep triggering cortisol. We need to start giving a shape to the solution. Okay, I may not know what I want to do or what I'm good at, but still there is a way. And that's where a coach can be really helpful through some specific question, can help the client give a different shape, more tangible shape to that question mark, so that this shape will counterbalance the loss of thinking, I want to change my career. If we don't do this step correctly, people will always be stuck and will feel fear throughout the journey. But with the right questions and with the right tool, by giving a shape that sounds a little bit more solid and tangible, then we can open up mindset to take the steps needed to understand exactly what that shape means in the job market. But without this, it means we are lost in an ocean of fear. We don't know where to swim to feel safe. So I always guide them into understanding their fear, where it comes from. Very often it comes from not knowing. So once you know that the problem is not knowing, okay, let's figure out the steps at least so that we will reduce that sensation of fear, and that will give you that mental openness needed to move on.
Bruna, what tips or techniques have you either coached yourself or you've seen others use to help them market themselves as a candidate in their job search?
Okay, here again, the brain comes in because we need to understand the psychology of the person that is on the other side. This is another mistake we often do. When it's time to introduce ourselves as a candidate, we tend to think about our CV, our story, our employment, and everything that is about us. But if you think about this, Bob, a recruiter is looking at your CV not to understand who you are, what you did, and what you're great at. The only thing that they have in mind when they look at your CV is their needs and the problems that they are looking to solve by finding the right person. So I would say the best thing to do is to do a thorough research on the company, but going beyond the obvious. So I'm not talking about what a company say on the job description or on their website. I'm talking about what clients say, for example, on Google Reviews or Trustpilot, on what the employees of that company say on LinkedIn or on Glassdoor. Everything that helps us understand way more so that when we create our CV and we prepare for our interview, we only tell them what we know is really relevant for them. And that may give us an advantage on other candidates because generally candidates tend to stop at what they say on their website and the job description. But going way beyond, as I said, even looking at interviews of the CEO or other executives on YouTube or podcasts can help the candidate understand much more. And because a candidate who's changing career is generally weaker in terms of CV, I would never recommend to apply for a job with a CV because, let's be honest, it's your weakest card. No matter how much you try to match what they want to hear, if you're completely changing your career, still you don't have experience. So my suggestion to my clients is to never go to the new employer with a CV, but find a different way, perhaps through the network, to connect, impress them, perhaps with a special project or something that they don't expect. And once they are impressed, then okay, maybe you can send your CV, but I wouldn't start with my weakest card, to be honest. It's not wise and it's not effective.
Let's go to our lightning round. This is where you get 10 or 15 seconds to give your thoughts about the topic that I raise. First one is the style of dress for the interview.
Yeah, I would definitely go there professionally. I know it's a different world and then you want to be who you are all the time, but I would still say that what you wear says a lot about you. Now, I'm not saying that you should go in a suit if a suit doesn't suit you, but still show some professionalism. You don't have to hide your personality, but you want to show respect. And another important thing to say is that often recruiters might come from a different generation and they might not understand our way of thinking and dressing and so on. So it's a matter of finding a balance between who you are and what means respect for the other person. So professionalism, whatever it means to you from your own perspective.
Next one, thank you notes after the interview.
Yes, definitely, especially if you're changing your career. The most important thing is to build relationship, even because once you have a relationship, a positive one, it's more difficult for them to say no. I'm not saying that you should use subtle techniques to influence them, but if you are at the same stage with another candidate, which is as likely as you to get the job, that one who builds a relationship has more probabilities to win. So definitely a thank you note. And I would also add something that makes them feel great. Sometimes we forget that hiring managers are human too, and everything that makes them smile is a good point for us as well. So a sincere and genuine compliment or appreciation for something specific. So I wouldn't say just thank you so much, it's been brilliant, I loved it. Not this, but something more specific like, oh, I really love the way you posed the question because while I understand that you were trying to understand more about my experience, you really cared about making me feel at ease. And that's something I highly appreciate. Thank you so much. So being specific when we say thank you.
When do you discuss pay and benefit issues?
When they bring the topic, not before. So I would leave it to them. It shows confidence. They will come to that topic anyway. So the best moment is when they bring it on. Let them do it, recognize their status. They know what they're doing, so I would always wait for them to bring the topic on.
References.
References is something that you should always offer, but not writing in the CV, also because it will make it uselessly long. I think it's important to say that references are available upon request, but only when they are requested, you should send them. I know some people argue it's not relevant anymore, but I would say there's no harm in adding that sentence at the end of the CV.
Bruna, as we close this up, are there any books or other resources that you would recommend to someone who's going through their own personal transition?
Yeah, there's the book I'm writing, but it's not ready yet. In between, a good book is probably Find Your Element. Now, Find Your Element is a book from Sir Ken Robinson, which unfortunately we've lost, I think, a couple of years ago. He is the man that, until a couple of years ago, he got the most viewed TED Talk ever. And he has very interesting ideas about education. So his book helps finding your element. Again, what makes you feel alive? When you understand what makes you feel alive is already directing you into a specific industry and sector. So you don't, because technically, Bob, you could do any job if you set your mind to. You just want to go for something that makes you feel alive and energized during the day. So finding your element helps you define the direction of your new career. So definitely that's a good one.
Bruna, if our listeners only remember 3 things as they go through their own job transition, what are those 3 things that you want them to take away?
First is that fulfillment is not about what you do, it's about how you feel about what you do. So always keep in mind that the most important things are your emotions. How you feel about things also determine if you're going to succeed at them or not. So that's definitely the first thing. The second thing is that the right career for you has to leverage who you are as a person. So forget your skills and experience. If you really want to be authentic, you should look at yourself, take some time to do a deep journey inside yourself, who you are right now. Bring all these gifts on paper and find a career that leverages them. And if it takes you in a completely different direction and you cannot afford it, try to see how you can combine the two. That's key. And the final step is go for it. Many people did it. I know the idea of changing career is really scary, but the reason why it's scary is because we don't know how to do it. If you work with a coach that lays down all the steps immediately, your brain will calm down and will start functioning in an optimal way. And then it's just a matter of taking actions. So if you don't know how to do it, just find a coach, but go for it. If you feel you can give more and get more from your career, don't just waste time in something that doesn't help, because ultimately it's not good for your health either.
Bruna De Palo, I am sure that in your life you have been someone that just goes for it. I want to thank you so much for your thoughts, for caring enough about people who are in transition to be vulnerable and share yourself, share your wisdom. Thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Bob, truly. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. We're working in unprecedented times as the world responds to the recent COVID-19 crisis. The fact is that even those who are not in transition understand it could be right around the corner, next month or a year from now. The purpose of these episodes are to give listeners support and the critical tools to adjust with the winds, wherever they come. I'll continue to introduce you to guests who have successfully, perhaps gracefully, or without too many battle scars, survived their own obstacle courses, and can share useful information on how to steady your ship or your world in this uncertainty. If today's message was helpful to you, please share it on social media. If you have any questions or podcast ideas for future conversations, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I appreciate your time you're investing in sharing these important conversations with me, my guests, and others who are going through life transition. Transitions between jobs, life stages, new entrepreneurial ventures, or whatever life brings. Change is constant. The more prepared you are for it, the better and easier the change will occur. Thank you again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you at our next episode of People in Transition.